Danny, thanks so much for doing this interview. You and I got together and we started working together somewhere in November. We met in Salt Lake. You and Natalie came down shortly thereafter.
Yep.
And I wonder if you would start off by just telling us about your diagnosis, the time of your diagnosis, and your health and what it looked like even before diagnosis.
Sure. Yeah. So actually started noticing symptoms of the ALS back in February of 2018. I started to notice weakness in my hand, and then it started to spread. So I knew something was up. So was on a search for diagnosis of what was going on. But even prior to that, for about 10 years, 11 years, I was dealing with chronic ulcerative colitis, and so that was debilitating in its own sense. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I had health issues going into that time period. I had recently switched diets and had lost a lot of weight, and got the colitis mostly under control at that point. But then about a year later after that is when I started noticing the symptoms. So I ended up getting diagnosed for ALS in August of 2018, and really wasn't given much in terms of what I could be doing to help slow progression or halt it. Basically everything at that point was just to try and make me as comfortable as possible, until the disease progressed out. So
I can only imagine the shock
yeah,
of going in, not knowing what was going on, and then getting that diagnosis.
yeah, and really there's a sense of hopelessness that you get with a diagnosis like that. Nobody that we had seen to that point was really willing to jump on board with us and get on our team to try and fix anything. They were just trying to make things comfortable. So yeah, we met in Salt Lake City in October of last year, and me and Natalie, we came down shortly after, and then we started up in November. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster since then. So yeah, there's some things that you've had to redirect a lot along the way. So we've got some notes on those kind of things if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're going through this today. And again, thanks for doing this. There were a couple things that are really important for me. One, the fact that in the course of the last 6 months or so, you've had a couple of step backs, but in spite of it, continued and are now getting better. So the message for me to everybody is just stick with it. And the fact that you've known this whole time that you could see your way through it. You've had a support network and willing to keep trying and keep looking at getting better. So that for me is huge. Let's think about when we first started. So that was November. You're probably going to have to look at your notes to tell me. So I know we ran some tests initially. It was really the inflammation. When you came in for me, the ulcerative colitis was a big question mark. The fact that you'd been on medications for a long period of time, but it didn't resolve. The fact that you still had some ongoing belly issues, especially if you ate anything that was kind of off of your diet.
Right.
And so one of the first looks that we did was for inflammation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did the hormone test,
Yeah.
the inflammation marker test, and came back that my testosterone was very low, and that was after we had done a few treatments and wasn't really seeing too many results. I did notice some immediate results, but nothing that was lasting for some reason.
Right, so we built muscle. You and I could see muscle. We could feel the fibers afterwards. But to your point, by the time you would come back, that muscle integrity was mostly lost.
Right. Yeah, and so it would have been an easy spot to give up at
Mm-hmm.
and just say it's not working. But we came here knowing that we could get better, and knowing that we had hope, and anyone who has ALS knows that one of the hardest parts is being your own health advocate all the time, because you're the only one looking out for yourself. But coming here has been just tremendous in the fact that we've been able to relax that mentality a little bit, because we know that we've gained confidence in you and the staff here to know that you all believe we can get better. You all believe that we're going to make a difference. And so yeah, I came here knowing that I'm going to get on the list of reversals. And so
I guess on our side, from a team standpoint, I think the thing is, we expect that there are going to be changes along the way. We expect that everything that we try may not work. The goal is to use that as our time to figure out why, pivot and transfer, and to try and just do it fast in order to get ahead of things, and then to monitor really closely to see, are those changes making a difference or not? And if they're not, then pivot and transfer again. Yeah, so I remember too, we'd measured on the inflammatory side and found an elevated tumor necrosis factor alpha. And then the question was, could we put something on board and make sure that we could get that number down? I remember testing 2 weeks later, knowing the number wouldn't be within range necessarily, but the question is, are we going in the right direction? Right, to just ensure that if we're trying something, is it working? If it's not working, let's change and try something different.
Yeah, and so after the testosterone test, we knew we needed to build that, and maybe another clinician's fix for that would have been to supplement with testosterone. But I'm a young person, I should be able to create my own testosterone, and so that was refreshing to have you say, no, we're not going to supplement testosterone. This inflammation is the reason your testosterone is down. And so we get this under control, it'll start coming back up, and that's exactly what happened. The TNF alpha levels went down, and then the next time we tested testosterone, it was over double of what it was before.
Yeah, because it really was cortisol steal, right? It was inflammation forcing testosterone to convert into estrogen, right? And we knew it because testosterone was low, but in spite of it, and you were really lean at the time, but your estrogen was elevated, right? So adding more testosterone would have just physiologically led to more estrogen. And we could have put a blocker on board, but the whole thing, that's all just a Band-Aid. So yeah, it made sense just to address the inflammation, and it worked. It worked and corrected the testosterone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then on another visit, you had started asking questions about whether I was an endurance runner or something in the past, because you had noticed something about my muscle tissue that wasn't quite what you were expecting. So I told you that I was a long distance runner for probably a decade, and so that caused you to change your mix for the injections, and then we started seeing a little bit better results as well.
Yeah, our goal is to match the muscle tone that person has. So just building a lot of muscle, that in itself is not the goal. And building muscle but not addressing the neuron health side also is not the goal. So if we can kind of get a sense of what does your muscle tissue look like, and then build the same, it's always going to be a lot more responsive, and it's always going to be a lot denser and healthier. Yeah.
And so then again, I had another setback. Next time I came in, I was feeling terrible. I felt like things had still been progressing. And the moment you saw me, you said, "What's wrong with you?" Something's wrong. Let's go in my office and talk. And then
I remember even before you telling me that there was something wrong, I saw you and you just looked terrible. You looked inflamed again, which we already had labs prior to that visit, and your inflammatory markers were within range. So if now inflammation's under control, and the time that you came before that, you were already describing the fact that your stomach was even better. So if you left the time before and you're building muscle and your stomach is even better, then how come you come the next time and you look so inflamed?
And I knew that the peptide that you had provided to modify the inflammation was working immediately, because all of my gut issues went away immediately, and so I knew that was kind of my litmus test on whether inflammation was still in my body, because I think you had described it that at the point where we first tested, my body was under such stress that anything it saw that it didn't like, it was getting out the nuclear launch codes. It was hitting it with every inflammation weapon that it had, and so So yeah, when I came back and you saw something still wasn't right, we narrowed it down to possible mold exposure. And then after discussing with you for a few minutes, I was like, yeah, well, I went back to a possible exposure point, and so you kindly requested that I get away from that exposure.
Yeah, because imagine you were doing well, and then essentially inflammation was re-triggered by a new exposure again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so eliminated the exposure potential, and then we started to address that mold issue. Started to feel better, started to look better. But then even the next time I came in, you saw something else wasn't right. I was looking very thin.
Mm-hmm.
I looked like I had lost all the subcutaneous fat in my body,
Mm-hmm.
which I had. I had lost probably 10 pounds since even I started coming here. And you started talking to me about, okay, what are you eating? And so I had been on such a mode of being paranoid about what I eat because of the colitis issues I had in the past, that I was hardly eating any calories. I was eating all good stuff, but I wasn't eating any calories. And I wasn't getting complex carbohydrates, I wasn't getting enough protein. And so we talked about that for a while, and you were adamant, you need to eat food. we can't sustain muscle mass if you're starving yourself to death. And so yeah, I took that to heart.
We set a calorie limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And over the next month or so, I started eating like it was my job, and I gained back probably 8 or 9 pounds. And then the very next treatment after that, started to see a lot better results. And so yeah, I'm confident that we're on the right track. We keep redirecting as we go, as we see new things come up. I think I heard Kyle yesterday make the analogy of like every test we do is like shining a flashlight in a corner of a dark room. So
Yeah.
you're finding out, okay, there's something in that corner. Yeah, let's get rid of it. There's something in that corner. Let's get rid of it. So you're just trying to get a picture of what's going on in the whole room to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, because imagine, it would have been really easy when you came back and you'd had exposure for both of us just to conclude that it was you progressing. And both of us just to kind of resign ourselves to that fact. If anybody is wondering, like as far as mold, you came in, you had vasodilation under your eyes, and you had worsening focus and concentration.
Yep.
That's not ALS. So I guess a lot of times if people have a diagnosis, no matter what the diagnosis, and then they get worse, it seems logical that it's got to be that thing. But if you're somebody trying to figure out what's going on, the question is, what are the symptoms that are changing, and what else could be causing those symptoms? So it didn't make a lot of sense to run testing for me at the beginning for mold. And even then, I remember you asking, should we run a mold test? We could have. For me, I try and be mindful of the fact that tests can be really expensive. And so the thing is, if it looks like that's what it is, it has all the symptoms, then there really is a common sense to this. Just because somebody has a progressive deteriorative disease does not mean every symptom is a symptom of progression of that disease. Because imagine, I get that the mold was triggering more inflammation and worsening symptoms. Didn't change the fact that that wasn't really the time to gear up and try and address the motor neuron side. Instead, it was really a question of stepping back and deciding what could have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I knew things were changing. It wasn't the last time you came in, but I think the time before when you said, hey, I'm eating all kinds of stuff and my stomach doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, there were several things in that I was lacking in my diet that were even good foods, but I couldn't eat because they caused inflammation and messed up my gut. But after taking the peptide, I could eat all sorts of stuff. I can even cheat on my diet, and the inflammation didn't come back. So I tried to minimize that, of course, but yeah, I started to notice a huge difference in what I could eat, and then that opened up all sorts of opportunities for gaining weight again. Getting good grains, getting things like complex carbohydrates that normally would have messed me up. I can eat those again and maintain that weight.
Yeah, I felt pretty confident that you were getting better. Again, I think it was about 3 times ago. It wasn't the change in muscle. I saw the change in muscle, but it was the fact that it was the first time that you basically described the fact that you didn't feel inflamed any longer. And in spite of eating foods that before would have really become a problem, I knew we had inflammation under control. And because there's such a link between inflammation and motor neuron devastation in motor neuron disease, that for me was the changing point. And ever since then, so it's not really a single modality. It's one of the more common questions that I get, is what's the thing that you use, or what's the thing to do? And it's not, huh? It's really a question of what's going on that's driving motor neuron damage. Can you correct it? And then when you see new symptoms, can you reevaluate and change again? Can you start adding different things depending on what's going on? And so from the time that you came in and said, I feel good, my gut feels good, I can eat all kinds of things, that's when I started seeing the difference. And you had said the same thing. And when I saw you and you came in yesterday, this is the first time I've seen you again with biceps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last time that I came in, and we after I had gained the weight back, after we had addressed the mold exposure, that was the first time that I had a good response on my upper body. We had lots of success in my lower body, but the upper body for some reason wasn't responding. But as soon as gained the weight back, got rid of the mold exposure issue, and then we did injections on my upper body, I started noticing an immediate difference. I could push myself out of bed easier, I could open and close doors easier, and so yeah, that was the first time that I had really felt a huge difference in my upper body, so it's really encouraging.
I'm thinking about your history. I'm thinking if there's anything else that would be useful for folks to know. Nothing comes to mind for me. You have anything else in your notes that you want to talk about?
Just maintaining hope, that's a positive attitude. It's easier said than done, obviously, especially with the relentlessness of the disease and the twitching and the muscle cramping that you feel all the time. It's easy to get depressed, but that's not going to get you better. You have to have a positive attitude about it. You have to have hope. You have to find a source of hope and just keep at it.
Yeah, I totally agree. There were a number of times where for you and Natalie, you guys could have just thrown your hands up in the air, but you didn't. And I attribute a large part of you getting better to the fact that you could see yourself getting better. And even when there were setbacks, you were willing to just come on over, readdress it, look at it from a different standpoint, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I can't thank you enough for doing this interview. It's always my hope to make sure that anybody that's out there with motor neuron can see that there's, I don't know, a solution. And so, again, you went through quite a struggle before diagnosis with all the ulcerative colitis. During the treatment time, we started again in November. We're May now, mid-May. So we're not that long into things, actually. But during that time, again, you've had a lot of good benefit and a handful of setbacks.
Yeah.
And in spite of both, again, you've been able to see your way through no matter what. And I think, again, to a large extent, it's what leads to the fact that you get better.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I appreciate you, Amy, and I appreciate the BodyScience crew. You guys are awesome.
Thanks for that, Danny.
Yeah. That's it.
Thank you.